You know, everyone loves to talk about one-hit wonders. I mean, just enter one-hit wonder into Google and you'll get a barrage of different books, articles, TV shows, YouTube videos, etc., etc. It's territory I've often considered touching on, but A, there are already people out there who do that better than I could. I'd recommend you just watch them instead. And B, there is a topic that actually intrigues me way more. The two-hit wonders. Like I've said in the past, almost anyone can stumble their way into one hit. Not to say that many of those artists aren't talented and whatnot, but a lot of them were just in the right place at the right time with the right sound. Hey, it happens. But to have it work for you twice and only twice? That fascinates me. To score a second hit and prove to the world you aren't just a flash in the pan only for all of it to fall apart regardless, that is a much more rare occurrence, and it's not something that gets a lot of coverage typically. Of course, that's also likely because being a two-hit wonder is a much more loose and unexplored idea. Hell, the definition of what makes a one-hit wonder is already pretty shaky. Double the amount of hits and double your trouble, essentially. But to me, a two-hit wonder is more of a feeling than an outright definitive, logical thing. I mean, there are plenty of bands that are technically one-hit wonders because they only had one song break into the charts. Jimi Hendrix, The White Stripes, Public Enemy, Rush. All of these guys are technically one-hitters, but to say that Rush is a one-hitter to any Rush fan out there, I cannot be held liable for what happens to you next. And that same principle also applies to the two-hitters. There are lots of bands that went on to be legends that technically are only two-hit wonders, in a sense. The Clash, Nirvana, Judas Priest, The Cure. Yes, the goddamn Cure. Only two hits. But it feels wrong to call them two-hit wonders. You know what I mean? It's that same principle. And hell, it's made even more complicated by the fact that some artists that you would swear were two-hit wonders, guys like Criss Cross, Kansas, Men at Work, nope, more than two hits. I'm just saying, this is gonna be kind of a tricky subject, but I did want to tackle it, and I did want to lay down a few ground rules for this list before we get started. Number one, the act in question can only have 2 Billboard US mainstream top 100 hit singles that broke into the top 40. So no genre hits, no foreign charts, nothing that just barely eked by at 99. No. We're going by basic, bland, boring, top 40 success. Number two, the act in question has to be known as a two-hit wonder. Like I mentioned, there are a lot of bands who could technically count for this, but a lot of acts have long superseded the idea or were never thought of as two-hit wonders to begin with. If I include every band like that on this list, it'll look like the band t-shirt section of a Target. I want to focus more on the acts that never really ascended past their two hits. Likewise, I don't want to include acts on this list that are more firmly remembered as one-hitters here in the States. I mean, guys like Scatman John, Aha, Vanilla Ice, all of these guys did technically have second hits, but honestly, they're more remembered as one-hitters here in the US. I feel like that's not really in the spirit of things. And let's be real, Vanilla Ice didn't stand a chance anyway. Number three, the act's hits still have to hold up. That one's pretty self-explanatory. Number four, the artist in question has to be very not likely to score any more hits in the future. This is important because I don't want to put anyone on this list half-cocked. I mean, artists like, say, Fun, Neon Trees, Carly Rae Jepsen. As of today, those acts are two-hit wonders, but they are still active, they're still out there, they're still touring and trying to make hits. You never know when they could surprise us. Especially with Carly Rae Jepsen, that woman deserves more than 2 hits, people. Number 5, the artist's work outside of their 2 hits has to also be worth checking out. Again, this one's pretty self-explanatory. I mean, if I absolutely wanted to, I could include a band like, say, the Bloodhound Gang on this list. They have 2 hits, but as I learned from making my last video...
Would you fuck me for blow?
Yeah, no. And finally, number 6. It's my own goddamn list, so shut up. Even with these guidelines in place, I might have to bend the rules a little just to make it work. I just don't want you all to treat my picks as gospel here. These are just a collection of my faves. If you have other stuff you think I should have mentioned, hey, that's what the comments are for. People, I'm just really gonna need you to leave your pedantic panties at the door for this one. So, with all that in mind, the top 10 2-hit wonders. Number 10. You know, in my top 10 worst rock hits of 1990 video from last year, I was really mean to hair metal. I came down pretty hard on the genre, but people, I'm a zillennial, ex-lennial, I'm not sure how you're supposed to say this, but I came into this music, and into existence for that matter, right as this genre was on its way out. I never got to see the glory days of hair metal. I got to see stuff like this. And yeah, once I got my first whiff of teen spirit, there was just no going back for me. Hair metal is just not something I really get. I don't have the proper background to appreciate it. But for as many jabs as I've taken at the genre, there were a few acts out there that did absolutely nail it. And weirdly enough, one of the best bands that scene ever produced came right at the tail end of its life. Hey, I remember you. Skid Row. Man, these guys were way better than they had any right to be. These days you might only recognize the name because it comes up whenever Sebastian Bach does something stupid, but they released their self-titled debut in early 1989, right around the time hair metal was starting to collapse in on itself. So right out of the gate, time was not on their side. Not to mention the band themselves were basically threatening to implode pretty much from day one. I don't have time to get into their story in this vid, but man, it's worth looking up. These guys were just a hot mess all throughout their career. This band should have gone down in flames, but this record actually spawned 3 big hits that have stood the test of time. Youth Gone Wild only barely scraped into the top 100 though, so in my book, they count as 2-hit wonders. And the 2 songs that pushed them into superstardom were 18 and Life and I Remember You. A stomping, little over-the-top piece of heavy melodrama and a crashing, gigantic monster ballad, respectively. And god damn it, these tracks still hold up. Say what you want to about Bach, but at this point in his career, he really did have a soaring set of pipes. He was a good singer with a lot of range. He actually can hit those super tricky high notes. He's not just... And many of guitarist Dave Sabo's hooks, riffs, and solos are also pretty damn good. I mean, a big problem with a lot of hair metal acts was that they tended to be way more style than substance. Just like emo, real talk. Hell, you were lucky if your average glam metal act even knew how to play their instruments. But these guys, they were fairly legit, at least as far as the genre goes. The self-titled record as a whole is still a really fun listen. Hell, Youth Gone Wild is outright one of my favorite glam metal tracks ever made. And even their follow-up, Slave to the Grind, is way better than any hair metal band album had the right to be in 1991. It's heavier, more aggressive, more punishing, and they were able to create a new spin on their sound without going stale or stepping too far outside of what their general audience wanted. And again, this was in 1991. Hair metal was in an absolute tailspin by then. For any band to have released an album as good as Slave to the Grind in that era is impressive on its own. But sadly, they weren't able to bank any major hits off that record. It took them 4 years to put out a follow-up to that album, and even though that record still got pretty decent reviews, all things considered, by that point, their hype was completely spent and their genre was all but completely dead. Plus, the inner band squabbling finally came to an explosive head that year, and it led to their eventual, inevitable breakup. As much as these guys hated, and I mean hated each other, they were not only able to put out some strikingly good music, but they did so in a time where their entire genre was bleeding relevance worse than a Mortal Kombat fatality. This band just should not be as good as they are. They just shouldn't. But their biggest hits have stood the test of time. Cherry Pie may be the last miserable dying gasp of hair metal, but Skid Row was its true last big resounding hurrah. And you know, if your genre is gonna go out with a bang, that's how you do it. Number 9. You know, while we're here, let's just stay in the 90s for a bit, but let's move on to the complete opposite side of the coin. Let's get weird. Again, this was something I briefly touched on in my last video, but the 90s were a strange time with a lot of strange music. As the glitz and glamour of the 80s died off, something had to take its place, and that thing got a little crazy at points. But it was great because there were so many artists taking these bold and exciting risks and doing stuff that people hadn't even considered to try yet. If you were a weird as hell band, there was no better time than the mid-90s for you to have a hit. And a band like this, whew, this is about as mid-90s as you can get. Presidents of the United States of America. Good God, that is a long band name. They broke into the charts twice with two of the weirdest songs to have come out that year. And this was the year of Cotton Eye Joe and
Don't want no short dick man. Eeny weeny teeny weeny shriveled little short dick man.
This Is a Thing of Beauty and I Need a 100 Gex version now. Lump came along first in 95, with Peaches following soon after in 96. And I mean, people just look at them. Do I have to say anything here? They're just having so much fun. Their lyrics are goofy, meaningless little piss takes, and they always seem to be laughing at themselves as much as they were anything they were singing about. I mean, here's a clip from a song called Kitty.
A pussy bird and looking so satisfied.
I mean, you hear that and you're thinking, oh, it's like innuendo or something, but by the end of it,
Kitty rap and scratch me through my jeans. Fuck you, kitty, y'all gonna spend the night outside.
no, it's literally just about kitties. Here's another single called Dune Buggy.
Spider-Man staring at the sand in the sky.
Again, it's just about how dune buggies are awesome. I can't argue with that. They were just so quirky and funny that it made them hard not to like. They didn't have to resort to lame pop culture references or shitty edgelord material. They just took the goofiest shit that would pop into their head and put it to music. And while this album is very much a product of 1995, it's also weirdly timeless in a way. I mean, you play these songs to pretty much anyone, even today, and you're likely to get the exact same reaction out of them that we all had in 1995, which is, oh, what? And they also had this just crazy, thick, and menacing sound to them too. I mean, listen to how heavy those riffs are. This slams so fucking hard for a song about peaches, you know? Actually, what they did to create their trademark sound is somewhat ingenious. The guitarists each played different variations of their instrument called a bass guitar and a git bass, respectively. Just go with it. They basically just strung their axes with both bass and guitar strings and dropped their tuning way down to create a super thick, super low, super growly sound. Even if the doofy humor doesn't work for you, you just gotta give it up to those riffs. These guys had them in spades. This kind of thing isn't gonna be everyone's cup of tea, to say the least, but if you like what you hear, man, they have a lot of other deceptively good stuff out there too. They have a weird classic rock style version of Video Killed the Radio Star. Video killed the radio. That's surprisingly good, and if anyone out there is old enough to remember the Drew Carey Show, they actually did the theme song for that. That's nice. That's just the best way to describe these guys. They're a very nice band. They aren't particularly deep, they weren't the best players in the world, and they never really evolved their sound too much, but they were delightfully quirky and they had just boatloads of charm. They're a good proof of concept for how far charm can take you in the industry. Whatever their shortcomings, they made up for it in being fun and infinitely likable. This warm, comfy nostalgia I'm feeling right now. See, this is what I thought listening to the Bloodhound Gang's back catalog was gonna be like, but
Kiss me where it smells funny.
yeah, no. But this doesn't need nostalgia goggles to be good. Grab yourself a fruit cup and enjoy. Number 8. Okay, so apologies if I've kinda already spoiled this one a wee bit. I've totally hinted to you folks that I was gonna talk about this at some point. When was the last time you thought about artists like Gotye, KT Tunstall, Meredith Brooks, the New Radicals? Especially KT Tunstall. I miss the fuck out of her. Why did we have to let her go? She was great. But you know, when I originally made this list, I really thought I was gonna have a higher place for KT here. Competition ended up being fiercer than I was expecting, but her 2004 album, Eye to the Telescope, gave us 2 fantastic acoustic folk bangers in 2005. And man, it was a damn good thing she released that album, because 2005 was not a great year for music. I mean, it had its highlights: Demon Days, Silent Alarm, The Woods, Mesmerize, American Idiots, and that's only naming a few. 2005 may not have been the worst year, but the stuff in 2005 that was bad, guys, it was so bad. This was the year of My Humps, Candy Shop, Photograph. It was the year Eminem became too stupid to tolerate, and the debut of Chris Goddamn Brown, not to mention the year of... KT Tunstall was a breath of fresh air, because the adult alternative scene was just chock-a-block full of tepid, asinine shit. You gotta remember, 2005 was also the year that gave us Daniel Powter and James Blunt, not to mention the horrible stank of John Mayer was lingering long and foul across the scene. There were a lot of whiny dudes moping and simpering about on alternative radio, and it just needed someone to bust some ass and cheer the fucking place up, you know? God, I think that's why I loved this album so much. It's so bouncy and lively and fun. She's really got big traces of like Annie DeFranco in there, maybe even a hint of Lucinda Williams. Her stuff has so much life and kick to it. This was the kind of stuff mainstream radio desperately needed that year. After listening to hours of stuff like Hollaback Girl, the Pussycat Dolls, goddamn Simple Plan, you need something like this to help snap you out of the suck coma you'd be placed under. And you know what? She ended up continuing to make some pretty nice music. Her follow-up to that record, Drastic Fantastic, is pretty good as well. Though that cover art is a bit ill-advised, but no, that album had lots of good songs on it. And while she would never again see the kind of success she did on her debut, she did have a fairly decent streak of hits in the UK until around 2010, and she's still making music to this day, contributing a lot of stuff to various film and TV soundtracks, including a very intriguing cover of The Clash's Should I Stay or Should I Go?
Should I stay or should I go?
It kinda has that whole melodramatize a classic rock song, you know, that tired-ass trope to it. But, you know, this version definitely works better than, say... Welcome to the jungle. Ugh. She's still going strong 15 years later, and her two most recent albums, Kin and Wax, were both surprisingly solid. I can definitely recommend you check out more from her. She's always a ton of fun. Give her a shot.
Forsaken me.
Number 7. Oh boy, again, I've kind of put myself in an awkward place with this next one, because this band... Yeah, we've already been here before, haven't we? I mean, if you saw the video I did on Hook, then you guys know I have love for these guys. In 1995, they hit the charts with their album 4 and its two lead singles, Run Around and Hook. But kind of already blown my load on this one. I already talk at great length about both of these songs in this video. I promise I'm not trying to cop out here, but if you want to hear me just break those two specific tracks down, I do it way better in this video than I have time to do here. But in more general terms, yeah, again, there was just no time outside of the mid-90s that stuff like this was going to find a comfy home on the charts. I have to think that part of it was due to the sudden and ugly death of grunge at around 94, leaving a very immediate and unexpected gap in rock radio. I mean, people tend to forget just how quickly grunge fell off. Cobain died, Alice in Chains went on hiatus, Soundgarden broke up, and in between all of that, almost every band got as far away from the genre as they could muster. In 92, it was the biggest thing in the world, and by 95, it had almost completely evaporated. It's kind of uncanny how fast that was. And at the time, we did not have anything nice and convenient waiting in the wings to take its place. But again, that opened the door for a lot of other stranger and less mainstream acts to capitalize, and Blues Traveler did just that. But man, something I didn't really get to touch on even in this video is just how crazy good 4 as a whole is. It's honestly a cracking great listen. Stand is another powerhouse banger, The Mountains Win Again is a lovely country-esque ballad, and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. People, you know me, an instrumental has to be doing something very right to get me on board with it, and this song is doing something very, very right. Blues Traveler are just a very skilled band. They came out of the same jam band scene as guys like Fish and Bella Fleck, and believe me, they can hang with the best of them. Even a lot of their earlier stuff is really good, and even the record they released after 4 did have some good stuff on it. Carolina Blues and Canadian Rose are both pretty solid tracks. They may not have been the most marketable band alive, but they had the tunes and the skills to make up for it. Unfortunately, their original bassist died from an unexpected drug overdose in 1999, and then soon afterwards they would end up getting dropped by their label. But they kept soldiering on, they hired a new bass player, added a full-time keyboardist to the lineup, and shook up their sound a great deal. And you know, I kind of hate to say it, but I'm not as big of a fan of their stuff after 2000. It has its defenders, though, and I certainly won't deny ya. These guys are definitely worth checking out if you love jammy, crazy, bluesy as all hell rock. And hey, if you want a harmonica solo, nobody does it better than Popper. Number 6. But okay, let's get out of the 90s for a bit and talk about another weird decade. The 80s. And to make it even weirder, let's go to Australia. Man, if you weren't there for it, you just cannot begin to understand the weird fascination America had with Australia in the late 80s. And even if you were, I'm still not sure you'd understand it. Crocodile Dundee, Yahoo Serious, the weirdly intense guy who sold Energizer batteries. It was a time of Foster's Beer and Outback Steakhouse. For a brief, strange time, Australia had America's ear.
I know those words, but that sign makes no sense.
And this branched out into music as well. It kinda, sorta started with Men at Work back in 1981, who, like I mentioned up top, are not two-hit wonders. That still blows my mind. Really? Kylie Minogue would have her first American hit in 1987. That was the same year that INXS released Kick and Midnight Oil released Diesel and Dust, both to high praise in America. Which, by the way, Diesel and Dust is legit one of the best goddamn albums of the 80s. Seriously, dig that one up. Australia was just getting all their corks in America's hats. I'm sorry. But another big success story from this era would be Crowded House. The story of Crowded House actually begins with an entirely different band, Split Enz. They were a sort of experimental, sometimes poppy, kinda, sorta new wave thing. They're a little hard to pin down, but they were a pretty big deal in Australia and New Zealand, and they have some damn interesting stuff in their catalog. But they never really found a way to cross over in the States. In 1984, they broke up, and their drummer and one of their lead singers founded a new group. In 1986, they released their self-titled debut record, and their third single from that album, Don't Dream It's Over, exploded into the charts, reaching all the way to number 2. Their fifth single off that same album, Something So Strong, was also able to climb all the way up to number 7. But you know, I completely understand why. These songs both hit super duper hard. Something So Strong definitely worked well for its time. It's an upbeat, sorta bluesy, kinda heartland rockish kinda thing. It's got like shades of Mellencamp to it, or maybe the stuff that Tom Petty was doing in the 80s. In 86, I get why a track like this worked so well, and Don't Dream It's Over. Hey now, don't dream. Ooh, that song is just a juggernaut. It just speaks to you, man. It's a song about being in a bleak, shitty, and hopeless situation. Certainly something we can all relate to in 2020, but it opens up a light at the end of the tunnel by, being encouraging. Their hits definitely deserve to be hits, but the cool thing about this band, I'm not even sure I can say their hits are their 2 best songs. Their next 3 albums are also really damn good, with loads of outstanding tracks. Into Temptation, Better Be Home Soon, It's Only Natural, Fall at Your Feet, Locked Out, Pineapple Head. They may not have had any other big hits, but they kept making really damn good music for another 8 years after their debut in both the 80s and the early 90s. Considering how many bands the end of the 80s killed, that's impressive on its own merits. Eventually, the alternative nation kicked into high gear, and that more or less ended up snuffing them out. But they never put out a full-blown stinker in any of that time. I mean, for God's sake, they have a song called Pineapple Head? And it's way better than any song called Pineapple Head should be. They aren't a band that gets too terribly celebrated these days, and America fell out of love with them fairly quickly, but they really held their own during their time, and they gave us some absolutely stonking great music while they were around. Their material has aged very, very well, and from what I understand, they're still pretty widely celebrated in Australia. In 2016, they were even inducted into the Australian Music Hall of Fame, so hey, their story has a happy ending. Number 5. Sticking to the late 80s here, one artist who was really ahead of her time would be Suzanne Vega. She was a young folkie hammering out acoustic sets in Manhattan in the mid-80s, and in 1985 she got signed to a major label to release her debut record, which made a big splash in the underground. That led to another promising gig writing a song for the Pretty in Pink soundtrack, and later in 1987 she would release her second album, Solitude Standing, and that record would catapult her into the mainstream, initially off of the success of Luca, an absolute rocket of a song covering the oh-so-80s, oh-so-sunshiny topic of child abuse. It's a heavy song about a heavy topic, and it really resonates with a lot of people, especially those who came up in abusive households. But even if the subject matter may be on the dour side, the song absolutely deserves your time and attention. It's one of the most sadly beautiful songs of the entire 80s, and she followed that up with the single Tom's Diner, which completely failed to chart and was quickly forgotten. Yes, really. Oh, you think I'm talking about this Tom's Diner? No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about this.
Sitting at the counter for the man to...
The original version. The original version is just a little a cappella thing. It's more free verse, experimental beat poetry than an actual song. It's interesting, I guess, but I have no idea why anyone thought this would make a good single. It tanked pretty hard, and for a while that was the end of the road for this track. Until copyright infringement. In 1990, an up-and-coming electronic duo named DNA came around and decided to remix the song with a melody taken from a completely different song. You can legitimately argue that this song is patient zero for what would eventually become the mashup. And initially, they actually got in big trouble for making this because they did it without permission from Vega or her label. They released it in the UK as a single, mostly just in dance clubs, but when it unexpectedly blew up, that's when the publishers came a-knocking. But thankfully, instead of a subpoena, A&M actually gave them an offer to straight up buy the track from them and release it as a single for Suzanne. Suzanne loved it, and America loved it. Their version eventually did make it all the way to number 5, and it cemented Suzanne's legacy, as well as their own. These same guys would actually go on to strike another hit with their remix of the Mummers Dance for Lorraine McKennitt about 7 years later. And honestly, even that is just scratching the surface of this song. I could go on about this track. There is so much interesting and weird history behind it, including the real story behind the real Tom's Diner, the conspiracy theories that still float around about the exact day this song was written, and its complicated and interesting history in the birth of MP3s. There's just, there's so much about this one song that I do not have time to go into here. Let me know if that's something y'all would want to watch, because that is a good video in the making. But yeah, Suzanne's hits still absolutely hold up. It's really a shame she wasn't able to score any more though, because holy shit, she is just, oh, my necklace fell off. So good, people. Her debut record? Phenomenally good. Her first single, Marlena on the Wall, might actually be my favorite song of hers. I think it's better than Tom's Diner and Luca. It's another captivating track with a cool as hell little story behind it. That album also has Small Blue Thing, The Queen and the Soldier, Neighborhood Girls, just tons of outstanding tunes. Solitude Standing is also another record that just bops from cover to cover. The title track, which was also a minor hit in the US, Ironbound, Fine Poultry, Gypsy, Wooden Horse, so much good stuff. And that's only on her first 2 records. She would go on to keep making music throughout the 80s, the 90s, and even the 2000s. She later went on to do theater work with fellow hitmaker Duncan Sheik. She hosted a radio series in 2003 that straight up won her a Peabody, and she's even scored a few Grammys here and there, despite her never really making the top of the charts again. I mean, I know some of y'all know me as more of like a rock dude. I can't imagine why. An artist like this is kind of a hard sell, but people, I'm telling you, head into streaming or pick up one of her records somewhere, whatever you want to do, and just take a dive into her catalog because it's both amazing and important for shaping the face of pop music. She is just so much more than the lady with the doo-doos. Number 4. Okay, now, this is the part of the video where every British person watching gets to look at me and go,
Our house in the middle of our street. Our house.
You what? Yes, Madness. These guys were a pivotal staple in the sound that would eventually become ska punk, along with other notable British acts like The Beat, The Specials, and to a lesser extent, The Clash. And the reason I'm getting so many weird looks from UK viewers is because in their homeland, these guys were much bigger of a goddamn deal than they ever were here. In the UK, their first 5 records all broke into the top 10, and they just had dozens of hits. Look at all these hits that they have in the UK. Look at that. It's especially crazy to think about as American, because over here, these guys were barely even a blip. They're only really a 2-hit wonder, and if I'm being honest, that's probably a little generous to say. Their first hit in the States, It Must Be Love, only barely scraped in at 33. It took a long time for them to cross over properly here in the States, and even when they did, they didn't stick around for very long. Our House would eventually take them to the top of the charts though, and this song, it's wonderful, but it's also just
Our house in the middle of our house. Our house.
the best meme ever. Yeah, I'm totally kind of bending the rules a bit here. In the US, these guys are probably more thought about as a one-hit wonder, but A, It Must Be Love got into the top 40, and B, it's a really good song, so shut up. But again, it's so weird to just think about, because if you only know these guys through their US hits, you just have the most incorrect view of what they were all about. I'll bet there's at least a few of you watching this right now and saying, wait, these guys helped create ska punk? This? Yep, I promise you they did. Their American hits are a exceptionally poor representation of what they usually did. They're good songs, don't get me wrong, but they were outliers in Madness's general catalog. You take a deeper dive into their discography, and then you find stuff like this.
One step beyond.
Then you get it. Oh, okay, yeah. Their 1979 debut, One Step Beyond, is an absolute shrieking jam of a record, and follow-ups like Absolutely, Seven, and Complete Madness also have so many interesting and lively bangers on them. It's really a shame that what they were doing never really caught on in the States, at least not in the 80s, because they were well ahead of their time. Their sound helped open the doors for the ska punk of the 90s to eventually crash in. We got there eventually. Bands like Operation Ivy, Rancid, Five Iron Frenzy, all of them were working from a template that guys like Madness helped create. But unfortunately, that music wasn't what garnered them the hits. So if you only know these guys from what you've heard on classic radio, you are just so not getting the complete picture of them. If you love your Less Than Jakes or your Mighty Mighty Boss Tones, you really should pay your respects to the mad lads who helped make it all possible. Strap on your checkered shoes and pick it up, 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 pick it up. I should have skanked, but I don't really have room to skank. I am not a proper skank. I'm sorry. Number 3. Okay, so I didn't want to go with too many obvious choices for this list. I really wanted to do my best to avoid being a basic bitch and just pick the easiest stuff I could. But on this one, people, I'm sorry. I can't help it. I'm a basic bitch. Blue Oyster Cult, a band that I'm gonna guess 40 to 50% of you didn't realize was real and isn't just a gag from an old SNL sketch. But in the 70s, Blue Oyster Cult was a fairly big deal. They started out as this kind of weird, heavy, dark band with really thick grooves and ominous vibes. Their original intention was to be an American answer to Black Sabbath. But much like Sabbath themselves, as the years went on, they ended up going through changes.
The Silly Music Boy Show is on hiatus for retooling.
The awkwardly parenthesized "Don't Fear the Reaper" was kind of meant as a last hurrah for that style, but surprisingly it caught on, and it ended up being the song that would make them superstars. Goofy cowbell and all. Now, Blue Oyster Cult are one of those bands that has been around for like ages and has put out just a million goddamn records. I know you people like long videos, but I don't even have time to cover every leap they took throughout their career. Holy shit. I'm already doing them a disservice by glossing over their very impressive black and white period, but I'm sorry, but we don't have time. We have to hurry up and get to the 80s or else we'll be here all night. Blue Oyster Cult are a little odd as far as two-hit wonders go. Usually when this kind of thing happens, it tends to happen as an immediate 1-2 punch. Either a couple of singles from one album make it big, or the big follow-up from the act's next album is the one that strikes gold. But for Blue Oyster Cult, it took them a good 5 years to strike another top 40 success. They were really popular in the rock scene with tracks like In Thee and Godzilla. This song is just so fucking stupid, I absolutely love it. But in 1981, they were able to secure another top 40 hit in Burnin' For You, which again is pretty weird when you think about it. Blue Oyster Cult wasn't exactly the hippest band in the best of times, but especially in the glitz and glamour 80s, how in the hell did these guys score another hit? Simple. Yep. Burnin' For You had a music video. And while it wasn't an MTV original, it still got tons of rotation in 1981, but partially powered by the strength of the video rotation, that song got more notoriety and it clawed its way all the way up to number 34. Not bad for a bunch of guys who, even in their prime, look like your dad's bowling team. And if my tone is a little cheeky in regards to these guys, I apologize. I don't want to infer that they're goofy. Well, they kind of are, but please make no mistake, they were a very legitimate band, and they have a lot of great songs to their name. Now, I mean, their hits are only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to these guys. And if that weren't the case, hell, their 2 hits are so goddamn strong, they honestly can't be denied. I mean, Reaper alone is a classic rock radio staple, and has been covered by just goddamn everyone over the years. There is definitely more to explore with these guys, and a lot of it is pretty decent. But fair warning, these guys were prolific. I would honestly recommend you just pick up a greatest hits with these guys and get a head start with them. But if you just have to start with a proper record, Reaper is on Agents of Fortune, and Burnin' For You is on Fire of an Unknown Origin. Both of those are pretty good. And like I mentioned, their very early black and white period is also very solid too. Feel free to check them out. You listen to this band, y'all be wearing gold-plated diapers.
What does that mean?
Never question Bruce Dickinson.
Number 2.
It's been 1 week since you looked at me.
Yep. Just like with Madness, this is the part of the video where all the Canadians get to look at me and go, dude, come on. But yep, Barenaked Ladies, as shocking as that may seem, only scored 2 top 40 hits in the US. The big one being 1 Week in 1998, and later in 2000 with the lead single off their follow-up, Pinch Me. They had other songs chart like here and there on like the alternative charts and stuff like that, but outside of this brief period, yeah, that's all the success they ever saw here in the States. They're kind of a flash in the pan over here. They never made that much of an impact, especially after 2000. Which again, I am positive Canada gives us real funny looks over because people,
I'm lying in bed, just like Brian Wilson did.
We did not understand what we had on our hands. God! This is another case where the band's hits are really not representative of their best work. Again, don't get me wrong, both of these songs are great. I mean, 1 Week with its rapid-fire verses and that sing-along chorus. I mean, this is a karaoke staple. This is an all-time classic. This song is gonna be with us forever. And I'll admit that Pinch Me is also a fairly decent track, even if it is kinda trying to be 1 Week 2.0. It's even got the rapid fire vocal delivery in there. Like, I like this song, but if I were making a best of Barenaked Ladies list, this wouldn't even make the top 10 because holy shit, these guys have so much good material. In Canada, these guys basically hit the ground running. Their first big hit was actually a cover of yet another song I've covered on this channel in graphic detail.
In a dangerous time.
And you know, I almost hate to admit it, but I could argue that this version is just as good, if not maybe even a little better than Bruce Coburn's original. Like, goddamn, people talk about making a good first impression. And that came out even before their first proper record dropped. Gordon, their debut, is an all-time classic. I feel like this deserves to be up there with some of the greatest debut albums of all time. Van Halen 1, Appetite for Destruction, Are You Experienced? Gordon deserves a seat next to those. I realize you shouldn't say stuff like that lightly, but y'all, I'm telling you, Gordon is really that good. These guys, they just accomplished so much in such a short amount of time in their home country. And all of this All of this is before the US hits happened. Like, even if Stunt never had come along and rocketed them into the stratosphere, these guys would still have been legends in their own right, at least in Canada. And my God, if you haven't dug into their back catalog, people, you know what? Homework. I'm holding you to this one. They've released several greatest hits compilations over the years. Any of them are a good bet. Or even if you're ultra sniffy about stuff like that, hey, just pick up Gordon and thank me later. The hits did kind of dry up for them after the 2000s though, in both the US and Canada, and they ended up running into some major shakeups after founding member and fellow lead singer Stephen Page left the group in 2009. But they've kept on releasing new stuff. They're still active to this day, and they've maintained a very huge following. And they've also made some interesting moves throughout this decade, including releasing a Christmas album, releasing a kids album, and they gained even more notoriety after they composed the theme song to the hit TV show The Big Bang Theory. I have complicated feelings about that. But BNL, if you didn't already know, are goddamn legends, and they completely deserve your respect, people. Their impact was way more than just 1 week. Alright, we are almost through the list, people, but before we hit number 1, how about we do a few honorable mentions? Soul Asylum. You know, I don't know if this is the case today, but I remember Soul Asylum used to get some big hate back in the 90s. Their hits came around while grunge was at its peak, and their frontman Dave Pirner really has a similar look and feel to Kurt Cobain. A lot of people derided these guys as a knockoff Nirvana, even though they actually predate Nirvana by several years and were doing something way different to what they were sonically. Hell, their second big hit, Misery, is actually a gigantic piss take on the whole manufactured sad boy thing that grunge had become at that point. I don't think that won them any favors with the legit crowd, but me, I was like 8 years old, so I didn't know about any of that. All I knew was that Grave Dancers Union was a bop. They would continue on for several more years after the hits and grow into something way more interesting than a knockoff Nirvana, which for the record they never were to begin with. If some hipster told you these guys were trash, I'm here to tell you that they were wrong. Good stuff. Tone Loc. Man, what would a two-hit wonder list be without Tone Loc, right? His 1989 debut, Loc'd After Dark, was a prime late 80s hip-hop gem. His low, gravelly, distinctive voice instantly made him stick out amongst his peers. He was on the goofier side of the hip-hop coin, and some of his stuff hasn't exactly aged well.
When she got undressed, it was a big old mess. Sheena was a man. So
yeah, but Loc was always a lot of fun. He was never really able to put out much more than those two hits, but those tracks are solid enough as it stands. I feel like he deserves a spot here, but in my heart, he is technically a three-hit wonder, because his song from Fern Gully also slaps.
if I'm gonna eat somebody, it might as well be you.
Is this Vor? Finger 11. Okay, here's the thing with this band. I will totally carry a torch for them. Their first two albums, Tip and The Greatest of Blue Skies, overlooked gems, really great material for its time. Their biggest problem, though, is that their two biggest hits kinda suck. The problem with this band is that they could never just pick one style and stick with it. They started out life as a kind of post-grungy thing, and then on the second record, they just went on full nu metal mode. Then on their third, they tried to transition into a more radio-friendly, light alternative kind of direction, and that record was where the hits started happening for them. So on their fourth, they just decided, fuck it, we'll sell out. And they became a full-on dance, pop, rock hybrid thing. Their hits are probably some of the worst songs they ever recorded. I hate to sound like I'm crying sell out like that, I really do. I mean, I'm happy they eventually found success, but the hits, wow, they are just really not this band's greatest. This band still does have a lot of good stuff worth digging up. Honestly, I still would recommend you check them out. It's just that, man, when they finally did decide to settle on a sound, it was the worst possible sound they could have picked. Oh. The Tip and Grayest of Blue Skies are still really, really good though. On my list, they get by on that alone. Fort Minor. Yeah, you all likely suspected this one was gonna show up, right? It pretty much has to, doesn't it? Well, not technically. It doesn't meet my criteria. Remember the Name only barely topped out at 66 back in the day. But again, I'm gonna bend the rules for this one because, man, these guys just feel like a two-hit wonder, don't they? This hip-hop side project from Linkin Park's Mike Shinoda absolutely floored audiences in 2006 with the hit song Where'd You Go? And I'm sorry, but if you even watched a minute of NBA in the mid-2000s, Remember the Name is etched into your psyche. They played that song all the goddamn time. I'm surprised it wasn't a hit. But outside of those two songs, that was pretty much it. It was always meant as more of a side thing for Mike to just mess around with between Linkin Park albums, so this act never got the chance to make more hits. Outside of the debut, this project has stayed more or less dormant since 2006, but Mike did randomly drop another single in 2015, and he has hinted that there may still yet be a future for Fort Minor, so who knows? I wouldn't mind seeing more if Mike's up for it. Kim Wilde. You know, I'm surprised there isn't more new wave on this list, but yeah, Kim Wilde is a great example of the new wave two-hit wonder. Her debut single, Kids in America, shot in at number 25, and then, like Blue Oyster Cult, it took her another 5 years to score another hit with her cover of The Supremes' You Keep Me Hanging On. Doubly impressive given that most new wave acts were lucky if they even survived 5 years, let alone had more than one hit. I listened to a great deal of her catalog for this, and you know what? A lot of it is pretty damn solid. Like Madness, she was a much bigger deal in the UK than she was over here, but her 80s stuff absolutely wrecks. She's got some real hidden gems in there. She has a bit of a sharp drop-off once the 90s hit. Yeah, no one needed a runnin' in the 90s version of Steppenwolf, I'm sorry. But if you've got a taste for 80s synth pop, hell yeah, give her a shot. And now, without further ado, number 1. Okay, so people, remember up top where I told you we were gonna have to be flexible in order to make this list work? Okay, I need y'all to be really flexible with me on this choice here. Because even more so than Madness or Barenaked Ladies, my number 1 pick for this list, if you're already aware of the man's work,
Oh, Superfly, you're gonna make your fortune back.
you are probably furious with me right now. And I get it. To call Curtis Mayfield a two-hit wonder is, well, like calling Rush or Jimi Hendrix a one-hit wonder. Somebody's liable to kick my ass for it. Because he is a legend of the R&B world. Originally rising to notoriety as a member of the Impressions, in 1970 he spun off into a solo career and cemented his legacy with album after album of gorgeously played, sung, and constructed soul music. His 1970 debut, Curtis, essentially paved the way for the socially conscious soul music of the 70s to thrive, alongside artists like Stevie Wonder and Marvin Gaye. Songs like Move On Up, Don't Worry If There's a Hell Below, We're All Gonna Go, and I Plan to Stay a Believer resonated with audience and helped serve as anthems for the civil rights movement of the 70s. Now, he actually did have a single that broke into the top 40 from that debut album, and he in fact had a few more after his two biggest hits. So again, yeah, my criteria is kind of shot in the foot for this entry, but okay, here's the thing. Even though these were hits, I never hear anyone mention or play Kung Fu or Future Shock these days. I don't know, maybe I'm listening to the wrong radio stations, but I never even hear If There's a Hell Below, for that matter. Which is a shame, because that's a really good song, but no, those aren't really the two hits that Curtis is known for. The songs that everybody recognizes from this guy are his contributions to the Superfly soundtrack.
Oh, Superfly.
The film's main theme and Freddy's Dead both rocketed into the top 10 in 1971. Now, the film itself,
Superfly.
I've seen it. It's been a while, if I'm being honest, but I don't really remember much from it. It's kind of your standard blaxploitation affair. I mean, it's no Godfather, sure, but it's gotta be better than that remake. The movie may not be fantastic, but the soundtrack is absolutely out of this world. Hell, the soundtrack actually tells a better story than the movie does. The movie kinda revels in the excess and less flattering elements of blaxploitation. It is a pretty cut and dry blaxploitation film, all said, but the music Mayfield wrote for the film actually makes a note to criticize the glorification of the drugs, pushers, and pimps that the movie was glorifying, and it highlights the devastating effects of addiction and exploitation in the black community. The soundtrack is basically a running commentary of the film itself, and it's absolutely brilliant. Curtis was famously asked if the content of the film bothered him, and his response was, "The way you clean up the films is by cleaning up the streets." Damn, he was not even fucking around, was he? Curtis's music basically rewrote the context for the entire movie, and to this day, Superfly is celebrated as one of the greatest film soundtracks of all time. And while he did find success outside of Superfly in later years, he never again saw that level of success. Part of that very well could be because radio stations and labels outright refused to play his music. Some of his earlier hits with the Impressions were even outright banned by stations, and often pop radio wouldn't bother him because of the push for social justice and equal rights he put in his songs. These days, if you aren't already in the know, you probably just remember him as like the Superfly guy, but he was so much more than that. His work was and still is a linchpin for socially conscious music, and his influence is seen all across black music. He's influenced everybody, and I do mean goddamn everybody. Everyone from Lauryn Hill to John Legend to Ice Cube to Kanye West to Bob Marley and even Jimi Hendrix cited him as an influence, and his impression on the greater scope of music simply cannot be denied. Again, calling him a two-hit wonder just feels wrong, especially when you know all of that about the man. And if you're gonna jump down my throat about this one, hey, I don't necessarily blame you. I get it. He should be more than that. But as it stands, his contributions to Superfly are his most celebrated work. And while those contributions are great, there's just so much more to the man and his music. And if there's any artist I suggest you absolutely take a deeper dive on, it's him. I mean, especially in times where it feels like we're forgetting the lessons of equality, justice, and human rights that Curtis often sang about in his music, in times where the fires of racism and hatred are being fanned more than ever, and every one of us holds a responsibility to fight back against the whims of corruption, prejudice, and evil. Curtis's work, it's even more important to remember today. And I, for one, I plan to stay a believer. I'm Crash Thompson, and I will see you people in the next video.
Freddy's dead.